Hello, and welcome to the Audacious Marketer, a podcast for the bold and tenacious. I'm your host, Mikayla Schneider, and I'm a digital marketing strategy expert and entrepreneur. In this space, we discuss a wide range of marketing, business, and life. So buckle up. We're about to begin. Hey guys, how you doing? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are at when you're listening to this. Right now it's the morning for me. It's the late morning. So I have my coffee. I just had a delicious breakfast and I am ready to tackle the day. I'm so excited to be here right now. Thank you so much for tuning in. If it's not obvious, this is the very first episode of this podcast, and I am so nervous. I'm so freaked out right now. I've never done anything like this, so this is completely new territory for me. I'm equally excited as I am nervous about this. Actually, I'm actually way more nervous. That's such a lie. I'm way more nervous than I am excited, but I'm so excited. Don't get me wrong. So I feel like I kind of want to talk a little bit about how nervous I am for this, because there's a lot of things in my life and in my career that I'm not nervous for anymore. Yeah, maybe 5-10 years ago when I was like 18 and starting something totally new, I was really freaked out. I was really freaked out about everything that I did when I was 18, to be honest. And I'm 26 years old now, and I am a lot more confident in what I do. Even when I'm trying new things or trying something that I'm still not completely advanced at yet, I'm still a lot more confident. I've learned that you tend to be more successful if you go into a task with confidence. Does that guarantee success? Absolutely not. But it definitely helps a lot. So typically I do things with confidence and with audacity. Hey. But there's something about this that makes me so nervous. And I think that there's this general, when you are putting yourself in the spotlight and when you are putting your more personal brand out there, there is just an insecurity that is natural to that. And I think that we tend to be really afraid of vulnerability. And me starting this podcast and putting it out there in the public gives so many people opportunity to criticize me or to have judgmental thoughts or say judgmental things about me. And that makes me really nervous. And part of the reason why I think I'm so aware of that is because I'm kind of a judgy person. And I'll fully admit that. I will freely say that I judge people. I will defend myself, though, and say that I judge myself every day. I probably judge myself way more than I would judge anybody else. And I also don't hold people to that judgment. Like if somebody's doing something and I'm judging them for it, I take it very lightly, depending on what it is. Usually, like if you are doing something that's annoying me and I'm judging you for it, I move on from it. Like I don't usually sit in on that judgment and my entire opinion of you is based on that one instance where I judged you. I tend to, if I see someone doing something that I'm going to judge you for, I tend to judge you and then go, oh yeah, we all have our flaws. So that's my defense for being a judgy person. Not that there is an excuse, but it's just sort of in my blood. It's in my nature. And I try really hard to not let it be an overwhelmingly negative thing for me and for other people. Anyway, I think where I was going with that was I know that people can judge others because I do it to others. And so there's just something really scary about that. And there's also this really, really, probably more so, a really big fear of failure. And I think that we all have that fear. So it's not exclusive to me, but I remember that feeling of fear of failure starting when I was like a freshman in high school. I remember having that feeling start at a very young age, and it just grew and got worse and worse and worse until I failed. And let me tell you, I have failed a lot in life. I have a laundry list of failures that I have been through and that I've done. And I wanted to talk about those failures on this episode. I think that hearing and learning about other people's failures, especially people who you perceive to be a successful person, hearing about their failures, I think is really eye-opening. And I think you learn a lot about that person, and I also think it makes them a lot more relatable, and I think it makes them more of an expert on what they're doing, because I can tell you my advice on certain things, and I can give you guidance or tips or whatever if you want, right? And I think that if my audience knows that not only am I telling them these things, but I've also lived through them before, I think that helps my credibility. That, hey, I did this and I failed at it, and this is what I learned in the process. I didn't just pick this up in a book. I didn't just read this in an article and now I'm relaying it to you. No, I experienced this firsthand. Can confirm that this was a lesson that I learned. And of course, a lot of the times, I'm a big believer in this, that typically you have to learn on your own and you have to make your own mistakes in order to learn from them. But there are some things that, there's some advice that I took in my life that I needed to hear, and I'm glad that I got. If I can avoid having to make a mistake to learn from it, I would like that. But I definitely, again, I've made so many mistakes in my life and I learn from them. And the person that comes into my mind is my dad. Every time that like something bad happened, not bad, but like a mistake is made and a failure has been failed. And I take a step back and I'm like, oh yeah, this is the lesson that I learned from this. And then I go, shit, my dad's been saying that to me my whole life. And I always rolled my eyes at him when he said stuff like that. And now I'm like, he's right. Dang it. Yeah. I feel like everybody has one of those people in their lives. And that's such a dad thing. I feel like most people, it probably is their dad, where it's like, oh yeah, my dad's been saying that. And I just needed to learn it on my own. There was no way. My dad would say the same thing over and over and over again, and I just could not comprehend it. I would never have ever been able to process what he was saying to me. I had to learn a lot of this stuff on my own, and I'm grateful for it. So I have two big failures that I want to talk about, and there's sort of like a third one that's like right in the middle of it that is a little bit more elusive and less defined, but I wanted to talk about two of them today. So let me just build up to this. So in high school, I have such loving parents. I'm obsessed with them. They're such amazing parents. But I was successful in high school because I had a lot of support from them. And they were, I want to say helicopter parents, but I'm just going to leave it at that. So when I went to college, there's a few things happening here when I went to college. first and foremost, I had no fucking clue what I wanted to do. No idea. Oh my God, I had no clue. It's like crazy how clueless I was. But I also did not know how to be successful independently. I didn't know how to be successful as an individual because I had so much support from my parents throughout high school, throughout my entire life. And then all of a sudden, one day, overnight, I just had all this responsibility on myself within school, within my social life, within my day-to-day chores. I had to do my own laundry. And here's the thing. I was doing my own laundry at home. Like, I don't want to sound like, oh yeah, somebody was doing my laundry my whole life. No, I was doing my own laundry. But there's just, it hits different when you're in a dorm and your mom isn't there. I don't know. It's not the same. And so I had no idea what to do. And so just to throw it all out there, my first and biggest failure was my freshman year of college. Whoa, honey, it was bad. I did not do well. I literally failed a class. And I also got a D in another class. And it was embarrassing and it was hard. And I want to sort of put in a disclaimer that I had a lot of really amazing things come out of that year too. And I look back on that year, and as much as I think about all of the hardships that I went through, all of the challenges that I just did not rise up to and that I really, really failed on, I can also think of all the amazing friends that I made and lessons that I learned that were actually like really positive. I had so many firsts. I had so many first experiences that year, and it was so fun. I had a really fun time, while also having a really awful time at the same time. It was very strange. But I went through a lot of personal things that happened that were kind of traumatic, actually. And I didn't know how to handle it. And I didn't know how to handle having all of this time to just be social. I didn't know how to handle, class is optional, so I'm not going to go, right? I did not know how to handle that. And for a while, I think I was embarrassed to talk about my failure in college. And it's a lot easier for me to talk about it now, I think, because I'm older and I care less. But also because I'm older, it's a lot farther away from me right now. Like, if I tell somebody this, I can say, yeah, but I was 18, and that was, what was that? 8, oh gosh. What's math? 6, that was 8 years ago. God. Anyway, so I can tell people, that was 8 years ago, and I have since changed, and I have since grown up a lot, and I'm a much better person than I was when I was 18. And so it's easy for me to do that, but there was nothing more humbling, and I'm like getting chills right now thinking about this memory, than calling my dad it was the last day of school, and I remember calling my dad and saying, I messed up. This was a fail. And this wasn't a good thing. And I was like, you're not going to be happy with my report card. I don't know what you call it in college, if it's a report card. And my dad was pretty chill about it. My dad and I have a rocky relationship, but we also are like best friends in a weird way. I love my dad so much, but sometimes he can be really hard on me. And I understand why he does that. And so that phone call was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. And I think that for me, I was able to sort of pick up the mood here. I moved back home. That was rough. That was, oof. One of the hardest things I've done in my life was going from like getting like complete freedom my freshman year and like getting a taste of it and then fucking up. And then I know that this isn't it, but you know, it felt like a punishment to have to go back home. And like I said, my parents gave me a lot of support. And what that kind of means is that they kind of, again, not going to say helicopter parents, but they like to know where I am 24/7 and why am I not home? It's 11 p.m. and I should be home. And I'm like, I'm in college, guys. It's 11. It's early, you know? So I ended up moving back home. I went to community college for a year. First of all, to get my GPA back up because I was going to transfer. There's a really great college in my hometown. It's pretty small, but it was a great school, and I wanted to transfer there, and my GPA wasn't high enough for them to accept me. So I had to raise my GPA, and I did that in community college. And I also took that as an opportunity to figure out what I wanted to do. Again, like I said, I had no idea. So I wanted to take a couple classes, and that was really nice because the pressure of like, oh my God, I'm literally spending tens of thousands of dollars to take a class. And so in community college, that pressure's off, and you can take like silly classes that you're kind of like, maybe I might like this, maybe I might not like this, I don't know. And I took a variety of classes in community college, and I finally made a decision of what I wanted to major in and what I wanted to study, and then I was able to transfer over to the school I wanted to go to, and I ended up graduating with like 3.7. And I failed a class and I got a D in another class my freshman year. And so my GPA was, and I got a lot of C's. I don't think I got a single A that year. And I went from that to getting, I think my senior year I got straight A's both semester. Don't quote me on that. I at least got straight A's my last semester, and I might have gotten straight A's. And this sounds like I'm like bragging about it. And I kind of am because of the fact that I went from like so low to like getting straight A's was a really big accomplishment for me. And I think that that's something to think about, where it's like I turned my failure into a really big accomplishment. And that's not always possible with every single failure, but if you can do it, might as well try. And I think that when I finished my freshman year, I remember thinking, wow, I look stupid. I'm not stupid. I'm actually very smart. But I didn't show it. I have nothing to prove that I'm smart. In fact, I have lots of things to prove that I'm pretty stupid. And that was not a fun feeling. I don't like feeling stupid. One thing that this is probably a flaw of mine, but I really love when people perceive me as smart. That's such a huge compliment to me. And in that moment, I think I really learned how I personally hate looking stupid. That is something that is the worst. And I also think that there's like this like gender role a part of it, as well as the fact that I'm blonde. And that seems so silly, but you know, it's the stereotype of the dumb blonde girl who just wants to marry rich. And don't get me wrong, I still want to marry rich. So if anybody's out there, hey. But I don't want to be, that was a joke mostly. I don't like it when people look at me and go, oh yeah, of course she failed her freshman year. Of course. Look at her. She looks like she would fail her freshman year. And there's this stereotype that women are not as smart, and women can get away with their looks. And if you're a blonde, then you're just a Barbie, and you can, again, get through life with your looks. And I hate that. I hate that with every bone in my body. And I was playing into that stereotype when I failed that year. And after that, I remember thinking, all right, okay, I think I never skipped class after that. Like, I just completely 180 to my lifestyle and how I approached school, and it paid off. And so, that was just, yeah, I don't know where else I'm going with this. I feel like I'm probably repeating myself at this point, but that was a really huge lesson for me. That was my very, very first failure, and it was a doozy. It was probably my biggest failure to date so far. I've got plenty of time to make bigger failures, but yeah, it's probably my favorite failure because it truly changed me. I am a completely different person than I was that year or before that year. And if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be sitting here before you today. And I don't think that I would be where I am today. And I don't think I would have the work ethic that I have today. And so I'm so grateful for that failure because it really kicked my ass. And it was like dumping a bucket of ice water all over me and waking me up because I needed that. And going back to my dad could never have done that. My dad couldn't be the one pouring that bucket of water on me. My sister, bless her heart, she was trying to help me. She was trying to guide me and she was trying to support me. But again, the only thing that could have happened was me failing on my own and hitting rock bottom. And I did it. And you know what? Here we are. We're doing great. We're thriving. So moving on from that, I ended up graduating with honors. I found a degree that I wanted to study, and that in of itself was its own journey that I can talk about probably not today, but maybe later. And so then I graduated college and I started working right away. Luckily, somehow I landed, I was the manager of communications for a small, like a local political campaign. And I got that job because one of my instructors was, she played a huge part in that campaign. And she recommended me for this job, and I got it through her. I mean, I did it myself, but I had it in, right? And so I did that, and that lasted 9 months because at the, not even 9 months, I think it was 7 months. It ended in November because that's when the election was over. And I also learned that I didn't really want to work in politics or specifically in political campaigns. And so that was great. That was a really great introduction to the professional world. I learned a lot about politics, which was really cool. And I learned a lot about how political campaigns are run, which is really cool. And I also learned how to manage up. That was another bucket of water dropped on me that I didn't see coming. I did not realize that you had to kind of babysit your managers sometimes. And now I'm like, oh yeah, duh, for sure. If I ever have to not manage up in my life, that would be a dream come true. But that was definitely a shock for me. So yeah, I learned a lot from that campaign. And I also learned that I don't really want to work in that field because the lifestyle is very challenging and it's very tumultuous and rocky and a roller coaster. And I like somewhat consistency in my day-to-day. So I decided not to continue to pursue that. I almost kind of regret that. I wish that I'd maybe done a couple more because I made such great friendships with the people that I worked with. And again, I learned so much and it was a great move for my career. So I wish that I had done maybe one or two more after that, but I ended up I was living in Colorado. I lived in Colorado Springs, which is a smaller town. It's not a town, but it's a smaller city. And I ended up moving to Denver because I was like, this is where the jobs are at. And I wanted to work at like an agency. And so I started applying to all of these agencies, and I was still 18. Like I was still fresh out of college. And I mean, here's the thing. I I started working in the industry my sophomore year of college. Like even when I was in um, community college, I was still like I started to work with local businesses. I started putting together social media plans for them. I ended up getting a job at a small business where I was doing social media for them. I had done internships. I had this campaign under my belt. I was a tutor at my school. I had experience and I had done everything right. And I couldn't find a job for years. For years, I worked at a restaurant and just applied and applied and applied. And I went on so many interviews, and I couldn't find a job. And what I ended up doing is I ended up moving to California, and that in of itself was a really great learning experience as well. And that was a hard experience. It was hugely challenging, but I am so glad I did that, and I learned a lot from that one. But I ended up moving to California, and I took a job as an intern. So I literally went from this like graduate who graduated with honors, who had done internships, who had already had work experience, who worked on a political campaign, and I really felt like I was moving backwards. And I got this job as an intern at a very, very small marketing agency, and I basically had to work my way back up from that internship level. And that internship turned into a job, but even then that job was rough. It was a shitty job. Like, oh my God. It kind of ruined my experience with agencies, and so I feel like I need to like do some therapy or something to enjoy agency life a little bit more. I don't know. Again, that's a different story, but that felt like a failure in my life where I just constantly was being interviewed and applied to places, and I was not getting hired. And that was I don't know if you would call that a failure, but it was definitely a really, really big challenging part of my life. But then I kind of led into, like I said, I was doing this job at this agency and I was not enjoying it. I was having a really hard time with it. Not with the job, but mostly just with my manager, with my boss. And it led me to start my own business, which leads me to my third failure or my second failure, however you want to look at it. And this is another one where like I am so glad I did this. I learned so much from it. Did I make any money? No. I am in debt because of it, which is not good. I don't recommend that. But wow, I am so much better for that. And because I started this business, I feel like I doubled the amount of knowledge that I had within not only marketing, but just business and like, life, I gained so much life experience from it. And even now I'm like, again, like the college thing was definitely a failure because I literally failed. And then the whole job thing, you could argue wasn't really a failure. It was just a hugely challenging part of my life. And this one, I don't know if I would even use the word failure for this. Maybe my ego is talking and I'm like, I didn't fail per se, but I just decided to close the shop because I didn't have time for it anymore. And that is 1,000% true. I ended up getting a full-time job. This was kind of in the middle of the pandemic. The pandemic is still happening, so I don't know what the middle is. As of like this time point right now, it is the middle. If it I don't know. I won't get into it. But this was in the middle of the pandemic. I ended up getting this job working for a corporation. I'm doing digital marketing for them. I'm still working for them now. I love them so much. So I got this job and I ended up moving out to Salt Lake City. And I was also running this business, and the business was hair care products, and it was ethical and eco-friendly hair care. And I did everything from start to finish. I outsourced literally nothing because I didn't have any money to outsource anything. I had $0. Again, I was in debt before I even started. And then now I'm even more in debt, which is cool for me. Again, I would not recommend that. Do as I say, not as I do. Okay. So I did all of the product development. I'm not a scientist or a chemist. Like, I don't develop hair care formulas. Well, I do now. I figured it out. I spent about a year putting together a product, multiple products, a shampoo and a conditioner. And that in of itself I was spending probably like 60 hours a week. I was constantly in the kitchen formulating. I was constantly ordering new ingredients and watching videos and doing all this research. And I created a product that I'm truly proud of. Like it turned out perfectly. I ended up launching it took a year to really perfect it, but I ended up launching my business around 9 months in. And so I had a product that I liked, but it wasn't perfect. And they say if you launch a perfect product, you launched too late, is as the saying goes. And, I've only launched one product before, and so I don't have extensive experience with that, but I will say that I am glad that I launched when I did. So I can confirm that based on my experience, that's true. But I was doing that. I was building this website. I was not coding it. I tried to code it. I tried to learn how to code it. I still would love to learn to code, but to be honest with you, like, you don't have to code to have a nice website. Like, you can A, hire someone, or B, just do like a template, depending on what kind of website you want, right? If it needs to be really robust, like, big, if it's a really big website, I don't know. There's a lot of reasons to have somebody code your website, and there's a lot of reasons to just like have a template, have a theme, and customize it as much as you can. Anyway, so I built this website. I was doing the e-commerce portion of it. I was attempting to do all the accounting for it. I was doing all the ads for it. I was doing all the marketing, the social media. I literally was doing everything. And it's almost comical that I thought that I could work this full-time job and also run this business because of the fact of how much I was doing for this business and how I was not outsourcing anything. And, it's easy for me to be like, oh, shit, I should have outsourced a lot more. But I had no money. I still have no money. So it truly was not feasible for me. And I was losing steam. I was losing energy. I was losing passion for it. And I was working in this new job, which I genuinely enjoy. And I moved to a new city. And so there was a lot going on in my life that I was having a really difficult time with justifying keep going on this business. So I ended up closing it. So I will stand by that. Like, I wanted to close the business because I just simply didn't have enough time. The one thing that I wish could have happened, I wish I could have held on to it longer. It was about, it was open. I had been working on it for about a year and a half. And it had only been open for like 6 months. And that's when I stopped. And I really think that I wish I could have had more time to see where it could have gone, because around the time when I stopped, it was around the time that I had figured out the perfect formula. So I'd really perfected it. And I could see it potentially starting to pick up a little bit more slowly but surely. And so I'm curious what it would have been like if I still had it now. Like if I still had it right now. I don't know. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. That's life, right? So there's a lot of things. I made so many mistakes in that job. You could call them micro failures, if you will. And I knew that, and I wasn't upset about that. And I was glad when I made a failure because I then knew what not to do, and instead of not knowing what to do at all. That is huge, and that was my mindset going into this entire business was I don't know what to do. And so process of elimination, right? If I go in and I fail, then add that to the list of what not to do. And that helps me narrow it down. What are the best ways to do this? And so it was clunky for a really long, for all of it, honestly. It was very clunky. And I learned so much about marketing, and I learned so much about branding, and I love branding. I think it's so fun, and I think it's so cool, and I think it's really creative. But it's also so much pressure. The problem with branding is that you have to, the fun part about it is you get to think of all these really great ideas, and you have this entire list of things that you could do. And it's really fun developing that list, and it's really fun developing those ideas. The literal worst part, the trash part about branding is that you have to pick one of those ideas. And that is so hard to do. I feel like, at least with the people that I deal with on a day-to-day basis, humans have a tough time making decisions. We suck at that. And that doesn't bode well for branding and choosing a direction and choosing a path to go down, because you're stuck with that. You're committed to that brand. Whatever you chose, you're committed. Yeah, you can rebrand later. Yeah, you can refresh the brand, which is actually important, and you should always be, not always be doing that, but like that should always be an option. But you can't be rebranding every 2 months, which I tend to do. I tend to like come up with a logo and then like 2 months later be like, but what about this one? And then I'll switch it out. And then it's like, well, then there's no consistency with what I'm doing. And there's so many issues with that. Anyway, I'm really going off here, way off topic. That's something that I do a lot. So sorry. I'll work on that. But also like, I'm flawed. Okay. It's who I am. But ultimately, that business did not work. I ended up shutting that business down. I lost money on it. I did not make any money. Yeah, that you could call that one a fail for sure. A fail that I really am glad that I made. I was interviewing for this job that I have now, and I think that I knew that my business had an expiration date on it, and I was aware of that. I wasn't consciously thinking that, but in the back of my mind, subconsciously, I knew that that was the case. And I was not making money. Business was not booming. I was selling product, but it wasn't at the level that I wanted it to be and that I needed it to be in order for it to be successful. And I was interviewing for this position, and I had put this business on my resume because I spun it. That sounds like I lied about it. I had no lies on my resume, but I definitely made sure to really focus on, this was a marketing job I was applying for, so I really focused on the marketing aspects of what I was doing for my own business. And I was in this interview, and, in interviews, a lot of the times, even when they don't ask you for an example, if you give them an answer, you usually will talk about, I learned it from this job. Or sometimes you just happen to give an example for it. Or a lot of the times they ask you for an example or to reference when you learned it or whatever. And I was almost done with the interview, and I realized that every single question that they asked me, I always referenced my business. I don't think I once referenced any other jobs that I had. And I have had a lot of jobs. There's a bunch of stuff on my resume. And I was like, that's insane that all of these questions that they're asking, I knew of these things and I had an idea of how a lot of this stuff worked beforehand. But every time that I gave an example or I referenced a past job, it was always this business, because this is where I honed these skills, and this is where I went from being I don't want to say amateur, but went from being an elementary student of this topic to being an expert. I really defined my expertise through this business that I started. And that's when I was like, okay, even if this fails, and even if I have to shut this down, and even if I'm in more debt because of it, I'm actually so grateful that I did this. This was probably one of the best things that I've ever done for my career. And I stand by that. It absolutely was. And a big part of that is I'm actually starting an MBA program in January. And I was struggling with deciding on whether or not I wanted to get a master's in marketing or if I should go and get a business degree with a specialization in marketing. And I love marketing. I have such a passion for it. I think it's so fun and so entertaining. I love it so much. And business is definitely a lot more of a challenge for me. It's something that comes to me a lot less naturally. And so I was kind of really struggling. Should I do the hard thing or should I do the fun, easy thing? And my dad actually brought this up, that I'm a lot more into business than I think I am, based on the business that I started and how much I learned from it. And I'm still I don't know anything about finance or accounting. I did it for my business. I didn't do it right. I didn't do it well. But just the fact that I have been exposed to that has made me a better marketer, hands down. It's made me a better business person. It's made me smarter. It's made me look at things from a critical eye. And it's also made me understand that there's a lot more work that goes on, that in any part, whether it's in a company or like a relationship even. I think it's just a really good example, or even metaphor, if you will, that there's so much that goes on that you don't know about. And it's really important to think about that. Like when I went into starting that business, I remember thinking, I got this. I can do this. All I need is just to throw a website up there and create a product and start selling. And then I'll just record the finances. How naive. So it was a good learning experience that everything is not always what they seem. They're never as simple as they look. So tons of life lessons. I could go way, way, way more into all of the lessons that I learned from that, but that's not a today thing. It's a future thing. But yeah, that was definitely those two failures were really big for me. They're my favorite failures. They're my biggest ones. They're the ones that I learned the most from. And yeah, I don't really want to fail at that same level in the future, but who knows? And who knows? Maybe this podcast will be another failure, another notch on my belt. But we'll find out. And if you guys want to see if this fails or not, go ahead and subscribe and comment, give me a review. There's going to be more. I have more podcasts planned down the pipeline. I'm really excited to talk about this, all this stuff, all this marketing and business stuff, and even some life things I'll throw in there. And I'd love, 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 love for you to follow follow along this journey and join me. And I'm really excited to see where this goes. So thank you so much for listening. Like I said, leave a review, comment, subscribe, do all the things that make sense for you to do, and look out for the next podcast coming up. Thanks, guys. Bye.